Started. Check, check. Mic check. Seems fine.
Are you a man?
Born a man, yes.
You born a man? What makes you a man?
In traditional sense, genitalia. But also it affects, at a hormonal level, the possessment of this genitalia and the testosterons that are being pushed into my body. But also I realize that gender as a thing is quite a imposed identity, and when one is aware of it, one becomes fluid through it. It doesn't necessarily see a man or a woman for oneself, but there is of course a larger political and cultural and social side of it as well, which one cannot ignore.
Okay, do you want to be a man? If yes, why?
I would say because I don't know if I would want to be a man per se. I don't know which man are we referring to here. If it's in the traditional sense of being a man, I think many of these traditional characteristics of being a man, being strong, not wanting to cry, not wanting to, express emotions and things like this. I think it's a sign of someone who hasn't reflected enough. And I think someone who has reflected on yourself, it is difficult to classify yourself as or aspire to be a man in a traditional sense. But man in the sense that I understand is so in the Indian understanding of a man and a woman, or the energy, manly energy and the womanly energy is seen as, so woman is known as prakriti, which is a word which can be broken down to prakriti. Kriti is creation, pra means pre. So pre-creation, a creation which is even before itself, or it's already being created as it's created, in a way, loosely translated. And man is the intention to create. It's not the creation itself, but it's the intention to create. And I think that way I identify with that kind of a energy of manliness. But it's not manliness in the traditional sense of all these being strong, not crying, not talking about emotions, or I don't think that definition is for me. I think I aspire to be a more conscious, creative man.
And why do you think people would push, as a man, or why they push these emotions or crying, or it feels like a force that you remember, you become like you want to cry or something, and then you remember not to cry.
Yeah, I think it's also a lot to do with, that's why I said someone who's not reflected upon yourself. So when say a man reflects upon himself, he would realize that all these things, that you have to be strong, you have to be this, you have to be, I don't know, you can't cry, and all these factors are somehow learned from the society or the circumstances that that person has grown up in. And when this man is able to see himself beyond his circumstances, or when one is not unable to see himself beyond these circumstances, like for example, if I'm born into a family where my father beats my mother, and it's not like in everyday beating, but it's like every now and then there is violence at home, let's say, domestic violence,
kind of punishment.
yeah, and you think that is normal, completely normal. This is how the world is. Like I've known people who were, like, as I was studying in school, who were surprised that their mother was, like, my mother was never like beaten by my dad. So it was very surprising for them, and they were shocked by it. And so this person, I don't know about this friend of mine or classmate of mine, but he might have grown up in a way that this violence is normalized, and exactly like the same thing, exactly like the idea of wanting to be strong or not wanting to cry or even use excess of power.
And this create also, if like a father hit his son, his son will hit something.
Yeah.
And this something will hit something.
Yeah.
It's always like this.
Yeah. I mean, violence begets more violence. Like, you create more and more. And love also creates more love. Also. But I think most of our immediate, as in our generation and in my family even, I've seen like this, there are certain things that are still normalized in a way, which are not right. And even if it's not physical violence, but sometimes I saw my father being like mentally abusive of my mother, just because he had this position in the society, in the household, that he could say something like that, and something which can hurt my mother in a way, but from the position of his power, some sort of a mental abuse.
What constitutes? Thank you. What constitutes a man?
What constitutes a man?
And are there, maybe this connect, are there things a man should have or be? If yes, what are these things?
Sensitivity. Sensitivity. I think, like, exactly like there was a time when women's emancipatory movements happened, for a long time, but primarily I would say 40s onwards. I think there needs a men's emancipatory movement. I think there's a need for men to also start reflecting upon their own situation. And if they want to continue being this macho action man figure, or do they want to actually, I don't know, be aware of things around them and see things more clearly? I think that's why sensitivity is important, I feel.
Yeah.
I think that should, if it doesn't, but I think that should constitute a man, and that is something which a man should not be ashamed to have, let's say.
When was the last time that you felt masculine?
Every moment, I say. But also, this is again like that. Sometimes I feel that these words are also attached with themselves so much misconnotations. Like,
or when was the last time you didn't feel masculine?
Didn't feel masculine. There were times during sex where I assumed
Which is
the role.
actually the opposite, I feel.
Yeah, but I mean, this is where
But this
I'm
is
saying
yeah,
this is the time when I started, or rather, stop being a man in a way. Like in the sex system, the man is someone who projects,
yeah.
and the woman is someone who receives.
Mm.
And I think for me to feel feminine, I had to receive. I had to let me be, in the sense, to feel like a woman, or not feel like a woman, feel feminine.
Yeah.
As a receiving entity.
Have you ever been in a situation where you acted contrary to what was expected of you as a man?
Many a times, and also just to annoy the people around me. But I must also say, like, this is completely unrelated, but I must also say that majority of emancipated women who call themselves emancipated women are not yet ready to accept this kind of sensitive or this kind of reflective man, in a way. Because here, I'm talking from my example, and I would say that being in again, going back to the emancipation movement of women, and one of the Marxist theories speaks about reproductive labor. So reproductive labor is something that you do at home, like domestic work, cleaning, cooking, taking care of kids, etc., etc. These things did not have any value as labor, and they fought for this to have value as labor, and there are many feminist Marxist theories around it. And if I apply this in my own situation, me having had come to Germany and not have had the chance to immediately start working or start doing things, I saw myself taking care of what the house was, like cooking, cleaning, which is traditionally understood as a woman's job, and I saw the same kind of treatment that those women might have had towards me by another woman, where my labor was not recognized as something valuable because there was no money involved in it, and there was a sense of how do you say, disrespect to what I was doing, and disrespect which transcended into affection being reduced, admiration being reduced, which I could not do anything about it. I could not say, okay, I'll pick up a job tomorrow, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the job that I felt doing, or rather I was doing, was not recognized as a job, as a labor, as something that I'm doing. And this is, I don't know, I just want to stretch our conversation out to a little larger sense. I think there has to be some sort of way in which in a partnership, forget like living alone or whatever, in a partnership, that this kind of labor is recognized, or even in a vacay system, this kind of labor is recognized, that okay, you're doing housework. Just because there's no supervisor looking at you and checking what hours you're putting in, and there is a company which is employing you, if it's not that kind of structure, then it should be still in some way recognized as value of labor.
Yeah.
But anyways, go on.
No, I got you. What was your dream as a child?
I wanted to be a pilot.
How would you describe yourself as a boy?
As a
boy.
Fat and life loving.
That's good. You're not?
Huh?
You're not now?
No, now I'm not fat.
But life lover.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you have a role model as a child? If yes, which role models?
Many over the course of my life. There wasn't just one. They were, like film stars, cricketers. Then at some point, like when I grew a little older, authors. Yeah, but most of them men, I must say.
And is that what it means to be based on those roles models as a man?
I think each of these role models served some sort of part in my life, but I was never shy to, or rather, didn't waste time if I felt that the role model was irrelevant. I would throw it away
Mm.
and move on to whatever's next.
Is your image based on those men role models?
Many, yes. Many. But I think I have better man role models now also. I mean, that's the whole process, that I've been constantly filtering what was irrelevant, and the what are left are people who are, even though they are by birth or by gender maybe male, they don't, I don't know, that's not the immediate thing that you
Can see or
yeah,
catch.
or that,
yeah.
like for example, when you're younger, as a child or whatever, you aspire to be like a film star or like I don't know, WWF wrestler or whatever, because you identify with these muscles, that the car that this guy drives, or the women that he's with,
To be the championship.
yeah. But then as you grow, not just by age but also with like your soul and your mind, I think you just connect with completely different things. Like even, I mean, now I have role models which I must admit that majority of them are still men. But also right now I have more women as my role models than I had ever before. And yeah.
If this is not too personal, who was your father?
How?
Like, who is he? What did he do?
He was
How is you and him as a son and father?
I think there are a lot of things that I draw from him, even subconsciously. He's a dreamer, and a very, very, very optimistic dreamer. And I have acquired a lot of this quality of being a dreamer and being wanting to do things, but I have consciously rejected a lot of optimism, which sometimes can be blindness also to things. Like, he has big ideas. Even at the age of, now he's 65, I think. He wants to put together an airline company, like start an airline. And it is fine if you have, if you have a lot of money and friends in high places, you can start an airline even if you're 80. But even though he's highly educated, he doesn't have a lot of money. He has in fact debts. He doesn't have friends in high places. His friends are people who think that who are somehow latching on to his big dream, thinking that when that big dream comes true, they all would have a share in it.
Oh,
You know?
good friends.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's how I see it, and it's mm, so. So I have decided, because I saw this his dreams and many of his dreams being crushed, not giving fruit because of these facts. I mean, he doesn't have money, and if you have dreams that big, you have to figure out smaller steps to get there. You can't directly aspire for the big. But he, as I said, it was an optimistic dreamer. Very optimistic dreamer. So he's a believer in God. God in the sense of not God as a spiritual entity, but more as, if I pray to this Almighty God, whatever, the God would take time out of all the other people that are also asking everything to only give
To you.
Yeah. And that does not happen. So if you're a very optimistic dreamer and believe blindly in God and chance, and you have friends who are all waiting around saying that, hey, your idea is great, I really believe in this idea. And it's really it's a really weird scenario.
Well, if your father looks very humor guy.
Yeah, I think that's his way of dealing with also, like, the world. Yeah.
Yeah. When was the last time you cried? And why?
Cried as in cried, or just had like tears in my eyes?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, if with crying, like tears, you mean? Or
Yeah.
crying emotionally?
No, crying with tears emotionally also. That's what you mean, or do you mean
Yes.
just having water in your eyes?
Yeah.
No, just water in my. I mean, you get emotional and sometimes you just get water in your eyes. It doesn't mean you're crying. You just.
Yeah, maybe you get infected of something, but no, like you cried very emotionally.
That was last Christmas when I went to Lara's parents' place,
Yeah.
and I knew that this was like the last Christmas dinner that I would have with this family. That time I cried.
Mm. When was the last time you fought?
Wow. One that I can remember is maybe 2008 or something, 2008, 2009, or maybe 2010, somewhere around then. Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable in the presence of a woman only?
What do you mean, presence of a woman only? As in, if it's only women in the room and myself, or
Or do you feel comfortable in presence of men only?
I don't get the question. Like, what do you mean? Like, only?
Presence.
Like if there are only women in the room and I'm there, and if there are only men in the room and I'm there,
Yeah.
which one I feel most comfortable in?
Yeah.
I think both. I don't have any discomfort. I mean, with gender, I don't have any discomfort. With maybe class, I have.
Class.
Yeah, as in if it's a very posh, expensive party, I might feel like a little reserved. But if it's like, yeah, if it's like an easy setting and there are people sitting around and talking and there's a club or I don't know, whatever, I don't feel. Yeah.
Have you ever wished to be a woman?
Mm,
And why?
as a teenager maybe, just as some weird fantasy.
Yeah. Kids will always want to try.
Yeah.
Are there topics that you would never talk about with the men you are friends with?
Mm. Not really.
You can talk about everything.
Yeah. I mean, things that I can understand myself and can have an opinion about, yes. Some things which are just feelings, in the sense of they're still not formed as words. They're just feelings. I don't think that I'll be able to have a conversation with anyone, actually. That's true. No, there's nothing.
What do you think about the hashtag #MeToo movement?
I haven't followed it so much, I must admit. Primarily because I never follow any hashtags or story behind it. Why? It's too time consuming in the sense like there's a lot of I don't know, I have my problems with like following hashtags in a way.
Yeah.
But I can say
Like
that
social media.
yeah, social media and getting myself involved in all these social medias and trying to get a grasp of what is going on around, it's quite difficult for me. But I have an opinion about this Me Too campaign. I think it is an important step in this digital age to somehow like build a resounding voice across the world. But I think it's still very much restricted to let's say the West and the English speaking communities of the world, because there are, for example, in India I know of women who might have never even had a smartphone, for example, to follow some hashtag which started in the US. It's impossible. So I think it's only restricted to that, but even for that it's a very important movement in itself, because it created this sort of ripple across the globe, at least the English-speaking internet globe, about this happening, and that it's so normalized, like that men like women are getting abused by men. It's so normalized that, and at the same time it's tabooed. It's normalized but tabooed. So it was a good way of breaking out of this into an internet realm, which is democratic or judgment free more than the real world.
Yeah.
So
I
it's-
agree too.
Yeah.
Have you any way, directly or indirectly, felt affected by it? This Me Too, hashtag Me Too?
I've found myself involved in a couple of conversations about this with women and with men. So yeah, it's and it in all these conversations I got to know more and more about the campaign itself, but also the topic around it. So I think one good thing it might have done is that it created chances for these conversations amongst friends about, okay, what do you think about Me Too campaign? For example. So that, I think I got to know more about such happenings, and that because of Me Too campaign. Yeah.
What means Me Too, hashtag Me Too for men? And does the movement bring with it advantage or disadvantage for men?
I think it brings advantages for men if they are able to be in solidarity with women who've been groped, harassed, molested, raped. If they can be in solidarity and be sensitive, again, it brings us back to what I was saying before. If they're able to be sensitive towards this,
I
then
think this would be like built for more and more. If this happened, for example, would be built for more and more men.
what happens?
Like to get even more in the new generation and afterwards and after.
Yes, I think.
Or if, for example, hashtag Me Too was not there anymore afterwards, or not, it will be there, but with men.
Yeah. That kind of scenario. I think it's difficult. It's difficult, I would say, because again, it comes back to the Me Too campaign, or like the idea of a male groping, molesting, raping, or mentally abusing, verbally abusing a woman is not so much to do with sex than with power. And the way men exercise power, it's also very closely connected to also how the nature of their genitalia is. is projecting. You know, they're always trying to get over something else, you know, like to push into something. Whereas here, let me come back and say, here you see a very similarity between the nature of their genitalia and how they see power as. Power is something that has to be pushed down upon someone else, you know, like inserted, impaled in a sort of a violent manner. I think violence that way is such a inherent nature of this power play that can only be done by men as man, who hasn't, again, going back to where I started with, going back to men who haven't reflected enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because then your projection of the nature of your genitalia, of projection, can also change, and you can also be receiving. You can also be open to open to information, even new information. Whereas if your question, I don't know if I understood it correctly without starting on this thought, but if your question was,
you said that, would it be like, is it always you feel, would you think about it like this, if men would always project and push and take over,
yeah,
that it wouldn't change? Should they change? Or if the other side took the commit or want to do something about it, will do the same thing, or they will try to change? Or in which way will it be?
are you asking if women were running the world
Yeah,
in a way?
it was easy.
I don't know. Honestly speaking, I can't imagine it. You know, because if it was if I look at the world right now, and you say that this can be definitely creation of men, in a way, the kind of war, the kind of destruction, the kind of exploitation of nature that is going on,
Yeah.
which is also like some sort of a projection of the nature of their genitalia, in a way. If it was instead run by women, and there have been civilizations and societies that were matriarchal, they recognized in some way a closeness to nature than ambition, like this kind of ambition, or than an attempt to overcome nature. You know, like if I'm understanding it correctly, most of the matriarchal society, or even matrilineal societies have been closer aligned with nature and natural rituals, on believing in nature in a way, than trying or be in harmony with nature, than say the patriarchal society that we inhabit right now, where we are constantly trying to overpower nature. We're trying to. We're also very, very disrespectful to nature. We're just like fucking cutting trees, digging holes, extracting oil. Like, it's very, like, it's unnatural what we're doing to nature. But I hope, if it was a women-run world, I think there'll be still progression in the society. There'll be still furthering of humanity at large, but it'll be of a different kind. It won't be this destructive, I feel.
Should more men say something about #MeToo?
Yes. What they should say, I can't say. What they should say is.
Do you feel like men remain silent in this regard?
In this regard, do you feel like men remain silent in this regard? Yes, they do. I think them not reacting is not not reacting on social media should not be taken as that there's no reaction at all. I also saw the hashtag. I'm generally not interested in social media hashtags and everything, but I saw the hashtag and I read a couple of articles about it, and then I had most of the knowledge that I got about this was through these conversations that I had with people. And those were, I think, I think the silence on social media, that they're not reacting to the post, should not be seen as that there's no result at all, and because men are silent, they're not doing anything, they're not thinking about it at all. I don't think so.
What does Me Too mean for women?
A voice, a chance to speak.
Does movement bring with it advantages or disadvantages for women?
Any movement has advantages and disadvantages, I think, and to make it the most advantageous, it's upon the execution of that movement. I think how it is executed on ground, not as an ideology, not as an idea, but how will it take real tangible shape in the society, or how will it be applied into the society, not just to the level of it being a hashtag, but what does it do for those societies at a policy level, at a legislative level, like the law and everything, judicial level. That is what would make the advantages are more than the disadvantages. For example, I'll say that at some point there was a marital rape law in India, which is now removed. Don't ask me why. I might start on another political debate. But staying with this topic, there was a marital law in India where if the marital rape law, if the woman claims that the man has been abusing her or has been having sex with her without her consent in a marriage, then she can file a complaint against this man and he can be, arrested or brought to law. There were also cases of abuse of the law, whether when women wanted to get rid of the man or wanted to get his property or whatever, she did this. So there were both advantages and disadvantages, but how it is executed at ground level, like if the policymakers were thinking about this law not just as a law of punishment, but as on a policy level, how can we introduce marriage counseling, right from when couples come together,
equality.
Yeah. And to start talking to them about them, bringing them to talk about things. So this, if it was done like this, it would have had far better effect than just punishment. Okay, so if the woman complains, then both of them go, he's of course, he goes under inquiry, there is police or someone asking him into or checking into his the crime that he's done, but also both of them go into some sort of marriage counseling, not to save the marriage or anything, but to look at them as to understand what they're going through. If I'm expecting too much from Indian government here, but if they were able to do that, then it would be a good application of a movement or of this Me Too movement applied in a good way would create some good things, but it has also disadvantage.
Okay, so can this movement go too far in your eyes? If yes, where does too far?
I don't know, how can it go too far? I don't know, I can't say.
How many likes?
I don't know.
Abhishek, that is all.
Yeah?
No.
Can I pee and come?
Yeah.
Let me pause.
P pause. Take 1.
And
Yeah, rolling.
take 2, rolling. The camera is rolling, baby. There is a crisis of masculinity.
Is there a crisis of masculinity
Yeah.
right now in the world or with me?
Masculinity.
A form of masculinity. I don't.
Or would you like to talk about you? I don't know. Or more general.
I think.
Be described.
Yeah, I think the best way to observe masculinity or effects of masculinity in society is by looking at popular images, cinema, Hollywood cinema, or such kind of, popular trends, what works. And look at the Hollywood stars. Look at how, or these images that are packaged and sold to us even through Netflix or through, I don't know, cinema theaters, but also other forms of media, through YouTube, through Netflix, wherever. I think many of these images, like the Hollywood image or Bollywood image or all these like mainstream images, are still holding on to some old, like this muscular main character and, kind of all these traditional things that we attach with a man. And this creates, and at the same time you look at other like independent films or whatever, and this is not the same. It could be, but it's not always the same. To understand masculinity in the society, let me get back to the question. To understand masculinity in the society, one has to look at popular media and representation of men in popular media, which I feel is a very good reflection of society in general. Like media, or rather, the way I see it, art reflects society and society reflects art. But if art is perverted, which most people consume, like most people consume this Hollywood kind of films or Bollywood kind of films, where men are represented in a certain way, if that itself is perverted, it's not the right representation of men at this point, or is it a falsified representation of men and women, I think what it creates is that it creates similar images, or it reflects the same thing back into the society, and men start looking and talking and behaving like them. Like their movie stars, like the role models that they adore. And so I think here's where I think when I look at how badly, other than a few Hollywood films are doing, where there are very few, I would say, relevant, content-wise relevant, and also commercially successful Hollywood films. And you see what are like really successful Hollywood films, and they don't have Hollywood, Bollywood, like any of these mainstream. There also you see a deviation from this typical image of a man. So that typical image of a man is also under, as you were saying, it is under crisis, and it's a good thing that it's under crisis. Because, I mean, that's what this is what I'm looking at the world and seeing, that although many people still consume these media and project back this imagery, this image of them as a typical man, there are also other thoughts that are circulating in the society in general, through internet, through social media, through WhatsApp, through these medias that are not that are so more personally generated than generated by a multinational media company or whatever. So imagine this as a narrative which is put into the society through Hollywood or like all these mainstream media, and at the same time there are individual information sources that you have around you. So every individual is going through in some sort of a war between these big images that are pushed through mainstream media and their immediate no news source, which are their own friends and things that they follow online or things that come to them through social media or whatever. So I feel that there is a friction, and it's a good friction, and it's a good crisis of masculinity.
Mhm. Are there still male privileges? If yes, what are they?
For sure, I would say. Not just in India, but also in Germany. Been doing a bit of India bashing, let me do some Germany bashing. The women get 33% less salary than men in Germany. Not on all fronts, of course, in some, but still. And going back to coming from an Indian perspective, I would say that a man can most often travel to any part of the country without really worrying about his safety in a way. You know,
Are these dangerous? If yes, who and what threatens them?
what is dangerous?
Being in a way what you said that was a whole question actually. Should have connected together.
No, say it. Ask me again.
I ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel threatened as a man? If yes, by what? Breaking that question.
Threatened as a man. I can't think of anything, but I'm sure it's because of this this male privilege we were talking about, that when you're in the privileged position, you're blind to any threat around you or anything around you. You know, you're blind to how do I say? No, I don't see.
Do you feel that you can speak and act freely as a man?
Yes. Freer than men, women, and trans, and other genders.
Is the male gender cursed?
In a way, yes. But I think its curse is itself, in a way. When it rids it of itself, I think the curse would be over.
Are men paralyzed? If yes, by what?
they're paralyzed by again the projection. Their look is always outward, in the sense they're trying to, now we're trying to go into space, always projecting outward. And I think it's a paralysis because then you don't look inward. You don't look inside, or you don't see what you already have and try to make the best use of it. But you're always seeking something. And in a way, that could be also a curse in the paralysis. That there is no satisfaction because you have not looked within yourself at all. You're always seeking something outside. Done?
It's done.